Alchemy's live on Fridays. And thank you so much for being here right now because whether you're watching this live or you are watching the replay, I know that you care about how you communicate. And I also know that you know the power of language to shape your life and your relationships. And today, speaking about the power of language, we are going to talk about two warning signs that are letting you know that voice of your inner child is telling you it needs to grow up. Oh, and for those of you who don't know me, my name is Alejandra Siroca from Language Alchemy, and I'm a transformative communication teacher and coach. And I help people like you communicate with more peace and more harmony in your life and your relationships through transformative communication. So, as we dive into this topic of listening to the voice of that inner child, I would like to know first, what are the words that come to mind when you think of inner child? What are the first, put it on the chat, what are the first words that you think of when this idea of inner child shows up in your mind? So, I'm going to see here what you're writing on the chat. And even if you're watching the replay, consider you hear inner child, what do you think about? I know that some of you might think about, oh, inner child is a sense of wonder, a sense of awe, innocence, purity, or something like that. Oh, I just got the message that you cannot hear me. So let's make sure you can. And let's see. I so let's see. If you can hear me, please give me a thumbs up to let me know that you're able to hear me. So if you can hear me, write on the chat thumbs up, and if not, please let me know that you're not able to hear me very well. Okay. So let's write in the chat. Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now? You know, technology, some of these things do happen. Okay. So I just wrote whether you could hear me now, and if you can, please let me know. And okay, now you can hear me. Wonderful. Okay, so let's go back because today we are going to talk about something important, which is how to pay attention to two warning signs that your inner child is communicating to you that its voice needs to grow up. So, as I was saying before, when you are thinking of your inner child, when you are thinking of the terms inner child, what are the first words that come to mind? Write it on the chat. Maybe for some of you, and even if you're watching the replay, write it on the chat. Maybe for some of you, thank you, Sam Mendoza, for letting me know you can hear me well. So, when you think of an inner child, what are the words that come up? Maybe is it a sense of awe, a sense of wonder? Do you tend to think of inner child means purity, joy? So if that is what you are considering, stay on because I'm proposing something slightly different here when I'm talking about the voice of your inner child. I'm talking about that inner voice. Yes, so Daza, you wrote youngster. Yes, we are going there because what I'm talking about is the inner voice that you hear when um, something you need to say is truly uncomfortable. And it might be that that voice is innocent, as Daza is sharing here. Yeah. So, for a moment, consider something that's hard for you to say, because when you need to say it, you feel discomfort. So, if you want, you can write it in the chat. But what I hear from my clients a lot is that asking for what they need is something that sometimes becomes really uncomfortable. It could be asking for a raise, or you've given someone a project and you have to give them a quote and asking for proper pay. proper acknowledgement or compensation. Or it could be sharing something with a friend and asking that friend to truly listen to you. Or it could be asking someone for a favor, like a neighbor, or even asking your partner for a date night. So, for some of you, asking for what you need might be uncomfortable. For some of you, like for many of my clients, setting a boundary could be uncomfortable. So, for example, telling your manager that there's no way you can do quality work with and finish the deadline and meet the deadline with all the other tasks that were assigned to you. That would be an example of setting a boundary. Or telling a friend that they can call you, but not only when they need help and your support. Or it may be setting a boundary with a partner and letting your partner know that it's not okay for them to keep criticizing you in front of others. So these are some examples of communication that might be hard for you because you feel uncomfortable. And as you're considering this in your mind, or if you want, you can write on the chat. That's great too to know, because when we share these experiences, we're really being generous with one another. We have human experiences, and these interactions are uncomfortable for many of us. And as you are considering that message that's hard or uncomfortable for you to experience, I want to encourage you to pay attention to your inner dialogue, and especially that voice of your inner dialogue. Because when you do, what you usually hear is that that voice is telling you something, but that voice is not the current you, not the you who's watching this video, but that voice is a much younger you, usually giving you one or two messages which are warning signs that this inner voice needs to grow up. This inner child voice needs to grow up. Your inner dialogue might say something like this: I don't like it. You are mean. It's unfair. I'm in danger, or something bad is about to happen. Or you leave me. And so, if you hear any of those messages in your inner dialogue, that's a warning sign that that is your inner child, a younger version of you speaking. And most likely, they are going to speak for you as you interact in that conversation, that situation that's uncomfortable for you. And the way you tend to interact in those moments, if you've gotten these messages in your internal dialogue, is by attacking, by judging, by blaming, or raising your voice. Now, sometimes we get a different set of messages altogether. And this is another warning sign that it's your inner child speaking in there and not the adult. So these other sets of messages could sound like, I can't really say what I need to say. No one pays attention to me. I don't matter. Or if I say what I need to say, it will be used against me. Or I'll be in trouble. Or there's something wrong with me. I'm in danger. Some, I'm not safe. Some version of, I can't say this because if I do, I'll be in trouble. So if you hear any of those messages, again, that's another warning sign that it's your inner child speaking there, and most likely are going to communicate using not only that voice, but the language of that inner child. And how does that translate in communication? Well, you might communicate by shutting down, by changing the topic, by saying, I don't want to talk about it, by leaving the room, by not setting appropriate boundaries, not knowing how to ask for what you need, by losing your voice. And of course, the great news is that when you came to the world with the ability to speak a language, but the language you speak is something that you have learned. And these situations, you've learned to react in these situations. And the whole thing has made it uncomfortable. Not just the situation itself, but how you react to that situation and the language you use to communicate in that situation, because that's the language you were exposed to, the language you learn to communicate in those particular situations. So the great news is that you can learn to communicate differently. You can learn to redirect that energy of reactivity that comes in those moments, and you can learn to express yourself as the adult that you are. Because now you have the power that you didn't have as a child and that your inner child doesn't have, which is the power to choose. You have the power to choose to communicate in a different way in these moments so that these communications, these interactions that are uncomfortable just become another interaction. It will get easier the more you do this. So, what's the first thing that you can do to learn a different language? Well, think about how you learned your first language. You learned your first language by getting exposed to it and by listening to it. So, the first step that you can take right now is to start noticing how other people respond to situations that are uncomfortable for you. And take note. You can either write it down or take mental note of how others respond to these in these situations, in these interactions that are uncomfortable for you, because by doing that you will be exposing yourself to other models of other language that you can use, and you are going to start to listen, and when we listen we learn. So this is something that you can do right now, and I can't encourage you, like I really want you to start doing this. Listen to other ways people respond to interactions in which you get triggered and you get reactive. And of course, another thing that you can do is go to a guide that I put together on how to redirect the energy of reactivity. And if you go to languagealchemy.com/5 steps, we're going to put that in the chat. You can download that guide, and that will help you follow the steps to come up with different ways of saying, of communicating yourself and expressing yourself when you get triggered, and instead of communicating through that voice of the inner child. And as usual, share your communication successes with me so that I can cheer you on. Share your explorations so that I can partner with you and ask you how things are going, and we can explore things together, and share your struggles with me so that I can offer my support as well. Thank you so much. And remember, you have the choice to communicate like the adult that you are. I'll see you next week.